Good morning, everyone. I know it's been 9 months since I last uploaded anything, but I'm back with more information for the time being. So let's get right into the topic, and that is the Flight 93 Memorial and Museum. So I stopped by here a couple of months ago just to see what there was to see, and what you're looking at now is the stone wall around the Visitor Center museum part and the official flight path for the last few seconds. This place really is out in the middle of nowhere, and it makes you wonder why the perps decided to do this out here, out of all the places. Driving up to it, you have a mostly never-ending sea of trees, and once you reach this area, it all of a sudden turns into this vast open field. And it makes sense if it used to be a strip mine, but it still is a little peculiar. So the first thing that I looked for was any sort of water feature. There was a small pond nearby, and that's all I could find. But Chris Hampton's new film goes into way more detail about the iron contamination in that region and how it was combated with water. It's called 9/11 Alchemy Facing Reality, if you have not seen it yet. It is the greatest breakthrough in 9/11 research since Where Did the Towers Go, in my completely humble opinion. Not that the other things along the way were not important, because Chris in part was standing on the shoulders of giants, but he himself is a giant. So go watch that if you have not seen it. And thank you, Chris, for including a few small portions of my research. It is humbling, even though it was only a few seconds, but the film has over 350,000 views now, on multiple channels combined. So a lot of what I saw here in Shanksville was quite intriguing in light of his research and Mark's, because they did a lot of collaboration with the Shanksville site. And along the way, over the course of 6 or 7 months, we kept shooting random tidbits of information back and forth with each other. But back to the memorial. They have this list of sponsors and supporters that I took a picture of in case anyone wishes to dig deeper into any of the individuals or corporations listed. The first thing I remember in the New York Museum was seeing David Rockefeller's name at the top of the sponsors list there. But in terms of the actual content that was there, it was about what you would expect, the official story. It would transition from things like on the morning of September 11th, 2001, American Airlines Flight 11 departed from Boston Logan Airport, to then showing snippets of live TV coverage in New York, to then diagrams of the plane and passengers and their phone calls, to then showing some plane debris and pictures of the whole, and then the cleanup. And of course, a wall full of pictures of the passengers and talking about their legacy and sacrifice and all that stuff that's supposed to invoke a sense of patriotism in the average American. Now, let me be very clear. I'm not trying to mock patriotism. I am a patriotic American. I love this country, and when I leave it, I cannot wait to get back into it. When I get back into it, I kiss the ground. But there is a problem that lies in the fact that lies are believed and used as the means to feel patriotic. So I'm not trying to imply that these passengers were actors. I will not speculate on that until further research has completed. I do know about a few small tidbits that show that some of the passengers were actual people with lives they lived, and not crisis actors or computer-generated individuals. Now, they did have parts of the alleged plane, including a portion of the nose, and I'd never seen or heard of this before. Unfortunately, it is only part of it and not the whole thing, just like the piece of fuselage found on top of World Trade Center 5, which is yet another topic. There were small credit card sized chunks of the supposed plane and actual credit cards and driver's licenses and other paper debris that somehow survived the crash conveniently. Now, this driver's license that you're looking at, it's hard to tell in the video, but when you actually look at that thing in real life, face to face, it looks fabricated. It was obvious to me just by looking at it, and I could be in error, but it looks like someone got a picture of her license and photoshopped in burn marks and cut jaggedly around the edges. I mean, it did not seem authentic. But in terms of the actual crash site itself, the actual site where the supposed plane went into the ground, it was blocked off by thorns, and you really couldn't get any closer than 400 feet. So the videos that I got are pure crap, and I wish I had a better camera, because I was only using the digital zoom on my phone camera, which is not actually zooming in, it's just cropping it. But oh well, I'll show you what I did record. Hopefully it will be helpful and beneficial to any of you watching this. The entire site is blocked off by this sloping retaining wall, and like I already said, intense thorns and a 10-foot ditch all along the path. you really won't be able to make it to the rock where the nose of the supposed plane was supposed to hit. You won't be able to make it to that rock or to the trees without getting arrested. And I was actually somewhat taken aback by the current state of the trees immediately behind the crash site. One of them has the top of it snapped off, and a lot of the others have no leaves on the bottom halves. But since 17 years have gone by, there has been some growth, and leaves are starting to grow on the bottom of some of the trees. Not all, but there's like this weird bald spot halfway up the tree. It's really interesting to see. And obviously a simple jet fuel fighter does not or cannot account for any of this. If you look closely at the field to the left of the rock, it seems to be darker in color than the rest of the field. I don't know if that's just something that was unique to that day. I don't know. It might not have anything to do with residual energy effects. But I sincerely wish I could have gotten much closer, but that is what I saw, and it does show up in my video. So in terms of the actual physical evidence there that remains to be discussed, again, it's been covered by Mark and Chris. I'm not going to repeat everything. You can go watch the film, go to Mark's blog, go to Chris's blog, and satisfy your mind. Now, I also saw the final installment to any of the 3 memorial sites, and that is the Tower of Voices. It was not actually open to the public yet when I was there. It was 3 weeks from completion. It is open now, but not when I was there, so I only got the opportunity to drive by it, which it's there. You drive by it when you're driving up to the museum part. So, I believe that the Tower of Voices is sort of like the equivalent to the Millennium Hilton Hotel in New York, except for the Shanksville site, and it didn't open until 2018. So, a bit delayed, but I believe that this final installment is the capstone, if you will, to this dastardly pyramid of cover-up and psyop. I hope that made sense, and whatever. Okay, so if you look at the dimensions of this Tower of Voices, you have strange numbers that I will discuss in a minute. An 11-foot inner diameter, 93 feet high. This is one of the first quote-unquote occult connections at the site. That may not be the proper term. I kind of shy away from using it, but I can't think of anything better. I know people have said synchromysticism. I hate that one more than I hate the term occult. So, there were a fair number of things there that paralleled other things too perfectly, and you won't catch them unless you're specifically expecting some sort of mysterious symbols and numbers and embedded philosophies to be present. So the basic idea of it all was essentially mockery of not only 9/11 truth, but also great spiritual truths, dangers, warnings, events, and mockery of those deceived by the lies used to hide these truths, and mockery of the victims, in a sense. So the first thing that actually is before you even get to this place is when you're driving up Highway 30, US 30. It's a few minutes before you get there, and they have these enormous junkyards with hundreds of totaled cars. And there was this intersection where it was like in the middle of a crossroads there was a billboard with Flight 93 flying on top of Jesus' head, which definitely hit me out of the blue, and it's right there on the verge of blasphemy in my opinion, at least when I saw it. I haven't looked into it very deeply. So the next thing is, it's also biblically related. As you walk up to the crash site, the museum looks a whole lot like Noah's Ark, with the door in the process of being closed. Like it was open and it is currently halfway between open and closed because it's closing. And what happened after the door closed on the ark and the elect of God were safe inside? Judgment came upon all the ungodly until they perished. I don't think that is a coincidence. There's a lot of language that speaks about judgment in lots of places throughout Scripture, and one of them is Haggai 2. And it happens to be the 911th chapter of the Bible. Now, I know, before you start screaming at me and posting a bunch of hate comments, I know the chapter and verse divisions were added in later, but sometimes the supposed coincidence is too perfect. And I completely agree, there's a lot of them that are in the wrong place, and I can provide you with the references of ones that are in the wrong place, that are just awkward and mutilate the meaning of the verse. But I can also show you a number of times where things work out a little too perfectly. Not that we should overemphasize the chapter and verse divisions at all, because it is only the text of Scripture that is 100% true. Anyways, the museum looks like Noah's Ark. That's the point I'm trying to make. And it is situated on top of a high hill compared to most of the others in the immediate surrounding area. And where did the Ark land? In the mountains of Ararat. Not Mount Ararat, the mountains of Ararat. And as I was leaving, about 10 minutes down the road on Highway 30, there was a sign that said Mount Ararat Lookout Point, or something like that. Please see the description for more information on the hotel that used to be at this peculiar location, but it burned down in 2001. I don't want to go into that. It would take too much time, so go look at the description. Read the description, see my sources, all that stuff. So the elevation of this Mount Ararat Lookout Point is 2,464 feet, 2464. The address of the Flight 93 Memorial is 6424 Lincoln Highway, Stoystown, Pennsylvania. Again, this could all be pure coincidence, but is there really such thing as coincidence in a certain sense? And also, the mailing address of the memorial is P.O. Box 911. Now, I'm pretty sure that's on purpose, and I sincerely hope it is, because if not, I don't know. Okay, so now there are several other occult, quote-unquote occult aspects, just strange phenomena, in respects to the number 93 and the planting of a bunch of trees. The number 93 in and of itself has some strange occult connections. I really don't want to look into it, honestly, because I don't want to be wallowing in this mire all the time. That's kind of why I've been gone for the past 9 months, because weird things started happening. But there are some occult aspects to it, apparently. Just, again, check the description for the links. Just like with 77 and 11 and 1028 and 1111. The number 11 represents chaos, destruction, and despair. It is also one short of 12, one short of perfection, falling short of perfection. So 1111 is double chaos, or chaos squared, or however you want to put it. 77 is also similar because not only is it one digit short of 777, which again represents perfection, but also it is 11 times 7. It is an attempt to mix chaos and depravity with perfection and completeness. There are so many strange number connections that I've made personally. I don't know if anyone else has realized these things, but I mean, it's the weirdest things, like the birthday of Steve Dayak, to the timing of when everything began, to the floors that were hit in each tower. Like, when you look in the first tower, the bottom floor that was hit was floor 93, and the south tower, the bottom floor that was hit was floor 77. It's like the lower floor that was hit by the supposed plane in each of the towers were the numbers of the flights to come. Okay, I don't know if it's a coincidence or not, but with something like this, it probably isn't. But what I was originally saying with the number 11, I found a strange connection that's related to the number of the plane. And a lot of you guys have probably heard of this before because of loose change. So some people allege that David Friedman saw Flight 93 at O'Hare Airport on April 10th, 2003. Now, I do not actually think that this was Flight 93. He simply misread the tail number. He substituted a 1 for a 4 accidentally. He wrote N591UA when he should have written N594UA. Loose change, again, they bring this up and try to use it to prove their own preconceived theories, but it makes much more sense that he saw a 4 as a 1, rather than somehow there's this enormous conspiracy that's accidentally exposed when the perps unintentionally leave Flight 93 in service for another 18 months. And when you look at the actual N594UA, which is what Friedman saw, what is the flight number? United 1111. Now, out of all the things, again, I'm not saying that this was pre-planned or anything. I think this is beyond human capability and now into something spiritual and dark. Some sort of demonic involvement or what have you. I don't know. Moving on now to the vast abundance of trees. There's this program, if you will, at the memorial that has volunteers plant hundreds and hundreds of trees. And it's been going on for years. And the common excuse, this is a common feature at all three memorial sites. Now, in New York City and the Pentagon, there is a better excuse for this, and that is, well, it's just more aesthetically pleasing. But here it's a little strange that they're planting a bunch of trees, considering there are literally tens of thousands of natural trees for miles in every direction. And I encourage you, go look up the word grove or groves in the Old Testament and simply observe all the times that the natural use of trees was perverted and changed to become objects of worship. Now, I do not want to speculate to the point of heresy or heterodoxy, but I would not be surprised if the sole reason that there are so many trees that have been planted purposefully is for something satanic. And I might also add that this memorial is quite high, and in fact it is in the highest county in elevation, at least in relative terms to the rest of the state. It is one of the highest places in the state above sea level. And I mean, you can even tell when you're driving there, you just keep going higher and higher along the way. And it reminded me of the high places in the Old Testament that wicked reprobates sacrificed things and even people to their gods. Others have considered the idea that 9/11 is mocking the crucifixion of Jesus and that it was some sort of great mass blood sacrifice. And I don't really agree with that in all aspects of it. I mean, there might be some truth to it. I don't know. I don't want to know, honestly. But I do think that it is somehow a part of what Paul called spiritual wickedness in high places. And please do not misunderstand what I'm saying there. It is not because Flight 93, or that the crash site of Flight 93 is located at a higher elevation than most of the state. That's not what I'm saying at all. I was just using that point to springboard into my other thoughts about how this was great evil that went on in the spiritual dimension that has small amounts of manifestation in the physical one. I can't help but notice parallels like these, and there are others as well from biblical passages. And please don't misunderstand that statement either. I'm not advocating some form of heresy that says that 9/11 is the fulfillment of Bible prophecy and that the book of Revelation is starting to take place or something. I don't know. You know, that's even worse than the most extreme forms of dispensationalism. Not all of Revelation is future, by the way. The first 5 or 6 chapters, at least, are both past and present simultaneously. Chapter 12 is another one that is butchered big time by the independent, fundamental, King James only, synergistic, dispensational, 7-year pre-tribulational, premillennial Baptists. What I am saying is that I see enough parallels between passages in the Bible talking about judgment and destruction and the events of 9/11 to say that something far deeper than we can imagine with our own feeble minds is going on here. And the effects are being perpetrated until now. Not that this is what any of those passages were talking about. This is not any sort of fulfillment, but it does seem like a foreshadow of events to take place before the final eschaton, in the likeness of the final judgment. Just how the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem under Titus in AD 70 was a foreshadow and type of the final eschaton. And how World War II is also like that. But I think 9/11 supersedes all these other ones because of the ensuing wars and lasting effects that have entirely revolutionized the globe for the worse. Or maybe take into account the story of Samson in Judges 16, where he is blinded, but then he pushes down 2 large pillars or towers and kills 3,000 people. I mean, those numbers seem a little familiar. Do you notice anything there? And again, I'm not saying that's the main point of that passage. I'm just noticing this off to the side. Okay, there's an abundant amount of eschatological language that describes the wicked sinners being turned to dust, crushed to powder, because of the spiritual elect cornerstone that is Christ, or they are being crushed by Christ. And don't think that you are exempt from being one of these sinners unless you are in Christ. Unless you repent of all your transgressions of God's law and turn to his Son, the Christ, as the perfect Savior for all who believe in him, you will be crushed by him. Christ is a rock. He functions as a stronghold for all who look unto him as the perfect atonement for their sins. But to the unrepentant, he is still a rock, but he will crush you and turn you to dust. That is the language in numerous Old Testament passages and New Testament passages as well, like Ezekiel 27 and then Revelation 9 and Revelation 18 as examples. And on 9/11, how people and buildings literally turned to powder. I think that this is some sort of mockery by the god of this world, which is Satan. So, lots of descriptions of the acts of wicked people throughout all the rest of Scripture can be seen on 9/11 in terms of identical mentality, at least. The mentality is the same, and so are some of the manifestations. You're either a child of God or a child of Satan, and Satan will be defeated. But he is filled with rage while his time is short on this earth and is doing everything he can to kill, steal, destroy, and persecute the Israel of God, the church. And one last random thing in the Bible. The only verse that Satan ever quotes is Psalm 91:11. 91:11. 9111. 9:11:1. Okay. It is still within the bounds of imagination that I could be stretching and overemphasizing any of these things. But I would find that extremely unlikely for all of them, at least. Maybe with a couple of them I could be wrong. With like Psalm 91:11 or Judges 16 or something. I mean, most people will say that I've fallen victim to identification bias or something like that, but the sheer magnitude of both the number of coincidences and the coincidences themselves tells me that this is only a small snapshot of the immense evil that exists in the spiritual realm. If we could see into it, I'm certain that we would be absolutely horrified. So I hope I have expressed myself clearly enough for everyone watching to at least respect where I'm coming from. I'm not saying that 9/11 is the final judgment or something. Okay, it's sort of like a foreshadow of it. It's what Jesus described in Matthew 24. Wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes, famines, pestilence, sword, all that stuff. Okay? It's type and shadow. It's not the final thing. So, please don't misunderstand anything that I've said previous to this. If you're confused, leave a comment or something, or if you know me in person, just talk to me, and I'll try to explain myself a little better, because I could go deeper into this spiritual dimension, into the parallels in the spiritual dimension, but that's not really the focus of this video, even though I just spent 10 minutes on it. So, change of subject now. What about the actual demise or destination of Flight 93? Since clearly the alleged impact hole is too small and there was a minimal amount of plane debris, what actually happened to the flight? Well, first off, I would like to bring up another plane crash from the 1980s that sheds abundant light on Flight 93. It is Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 1771. It crashed in California on December 7th, 1987, and it killed all 43 people on board. If you wish to know more about what actually happened on the flight, the information is available out there on the internet, but my focus is on the physical crash itself, not the motives of the guy who shot everyone in the plane and all of that. So, the plane crashed at a speed of about 770 miles an hour, so just slightly over Mach 1. And to be honest, as far as we know, it did not break apart before impact, and its maximum speeds are slower than those of a 757. So, does this refute the impossible speed of 9/11 aircraft that everyone has been parroting for the past 15 years? Well, no, not entirely, because any and every example that has been brought up of flights far exceeding their max operating speeds have been tragic accidents and incidents such as this one. PSA 1771 exceeded its max cruising speed by 270 miles per hour. That would be its VMO. I could not find its VNE or VD, but regardless, it still exceeded it considerably. Whatever it is, it exceeded it. And I should say this, the PSA 1771 was a, what was it? I'm going off the script here. It was a BAE 146. And it is about 67% of the size of the length of a 757, I believe. I'm probably getting that wrong, I'll link the information and resources you need in the description. So, its max operating speed is slightly slower than that of a 757. So, all that to say, we need to remember that 1771 was in a full dive coming from 22,000 feet rather than a descent in the case of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon. And I know people like to say that 175 was in a dive. It really wasn't a dive. It was more of a steep-ish descent. Someone needs to define what a dive is and what a descent is and what the line between them is, and why the dividing line should be there and not somewhere else. So anyways, you could also say that Shanksville was in a descent, or that Flight 93 was in a descent in Shanksville, depending on whether or not you think that the alleged plane crashed at 35 degrees, like the NTSB has said, or maybe it's I think the NTSB, or at 90 degrees like the impact crater shows. That's kind of a contradiction there, 35 degrees or 90. So, all this to say, the 9/11 aircraft cannot be validly compared with incidents like PSA1771 or Atom Air Flight 574. The information you need is in the description. Just go check out those links. So, both of those flights, 1771 and 574, they were both in a dive, and the 9/11 aircraft were guided with incredible precision. All these other examples of flights exceeding their max operating speeds, they're out of control, they're crashing into the ocean or into land, or they explode at 9,000 feet or something. None of that happened with the 9/11 aircraft. Everything was perfect. There was nothing falling off of it. It was in perfect control right until the moment of impact, and past the moment of impact because of the, impossible penetration or what have you. Now, the impact crater made by 1771 was very small. It was only 2 feet deep and 4 feet wide, so that really is not that much. However, the debris field was 20 acres, and just from the videos of the aftermath, you can see paper and broken plane shrapnel bits and luggage everywhere. We don't see any of that in Shanksville. Now, people will produce pictures of engines in the crater or fuselage portions in the woods, or other small things that showed up in pictures during the Moussaoui trial, but when you actually watch the footage from the day of, there is not anything there. There's not anything in the crater hardly at all. There's not really anything scattered around that's visible from the video. And then there's, of course, the other debris that the shoot-downers say was at Indian Lake 8 miles away. But there should be clearly visible debris in the hole and the surrounding area immediately after the crash, but there is not. In fact, at the museum, this is really interesting. The only time they actually show you footage from the day of the actual crash site itself is towards the back, after you've seen everything else, after you've gone through, the information about when the plane took off and the passengers and the crash and debris and everything. As towards the back of the museum, once you've been indoctrinated by everything before. Now, I went to this place with another person, and I've told them about directed energy in New York City and all that, and they agreed after I sent them one of Judy Wood's presentations to watch. So, they didn't know anything about Flight 93, and they believed the official story going in. At least as far as I can tell, there was no indication that they did not. But when this person saw the video of the aftermath, they said to me, "Look at this, where's the plane? I mean, you would expect it to be all over the place, but it's just an empty hole." And I'm like, exactly. And they went on to say, just based off of this video alone, just based off of the video of the crash site, the empty crater that's fuming a little bit, they said, "I'm thinking that whatever went on here was the exact same thing that happened to the World Trade Center." And this person had no knowledge of the information in Chris's film or Mark's research from the past few years. It was so incredible to see this person change their whole opinion when presented with photographic evidence of what actually happened. The damage looked similar enough for them to logically make this connection. And in August of 2017, that is what Judy Wood said should logically happen when you look at the aftermath at the other sites. This now leads me into the issue of what happened to the flight since it did not crash here, and since I kind of strayed away from that question a few minutes ago. I don't know what happened to it 100%, but Mark spent 3 years looking into that and eventually found a few anomalies such as air traffic control recordings that had 93 flying towards Washington, D.C., and he was able to piece these little breadcrumbs together. Well, I don't want to say breadcrumbs because it wasn't something that was purposefully planted. He was able to find these clues and make a logical conclusion, and that conclusion ended up being that it landed at Reagan at 10:28. Reagan Airport is the ultimate key to discovering what happened to the planes and passengers. it was closed for 23 days after 9/11. No other airports did this, other than Boston for a short period of time, which is where 11 and 175 took off from, and where we kind of are thinking that 175 ended up landing at. Because on MSNBC at 10:25 or so, when they went on Flight Explorer Live, you can see 175 still flying over Connecticut or Bronx. It's kind of on the border there. Anyways, I'll speak about that more in another video if I ever get around to it, and the information's already out there. Mark's put it out there. You know, go watch the film, go to his blog, all the usual stuff. So, you know, it's intriguing. There's no point in me reciting everything that he's said when his research is out there, so yeah. And he is sending me things that he hasn't released yet, and I am always astonished at what he is able to find just when I thought that nothing else was discoverable. Acknowledging Flight 93's landing at Reagan is the gateway to answering the planes and passengers question. And in fact, as he was finishing this research for the film, I came across a news clip from MSNBC where they reported a suspicious plane flying near Washington, D.C. This isn't the same as the Flight Explorer thing. This is something different. And as soon as I heard this news clip, I sent it over to Mark, and I'm like, look at this, you're absolutely correct. Excellent job perusing through anything you could for the past 3 years to come to this conclusion. And that clip eventually made its way into the film. You know, I mean, teamwork is so cool. Mark, Chris, and I were bouncing things back and forth with each other for months, and we were always able to collaborate with perfection or near perfection. There would be some flaws, obviously, but most of the things we would uncover something and then send it to each other, and there'd be some little breadcrumb that someone else would throw in, and it would open up this whole new vault of things that none of us could have discovered on our own. And it was mostly them doing the heavy lifting. You know, I tend to not be as deeply involved in this as they are, but oh well. Even with my DAC rebuttal, a lot of the things that I put in there were also things that Mark and Chris independently discovered. Chris managed to release an article 3 days before I uploaded my video, and we collaborated between very little and not at all, yet we came up with the exact same conclusion. And Mark was helping us with that. I mean, we both used the same pictures that Mark sent us in my video and his article. So there was a small amount of collaboration, but we did not get the idea from either of each other. It was something that we all saw by ourselves, and it was so cool. Anyways, the story behind how the three of us ended up doing this is basically a continual pattern of throwing in your 2 cents and then opening up this whole new cavern of information. So, again, I haven't done nearly as much research as they have, although Chris did reach out to me, and we did a couple of video interview chats. There was one with just us two, and another with me and him and Mark. So, I really am impressed and very grateful for his documentary and reaching out to me, and for Mark's willingness to listen to me and send me an abundant amount of information. We really need more people like them in the world. Again, since his film, Mark has found other things about the other flights, landing in other places, and war games and all that, so go to his blog page and satisfy your intellect. So thank you all for watching this far. I apologize that it's been so long since I last uploaded anything, and until next time, keep on climbing the mountain of truth. Alright, I will see you later.